Good morning, everyone. My name is MARÍN CONESA, and I'm pleased to be here today. I'm a researcher and a lecturer at the University of Murcia, and my research focuses on persuasive language. In this presentation titled Marriage, Consumption and Discourse, the ideological construction in bridal magazines, I explore how bridal magazines construct and circulate particular ideological narratives around marriage and consumption. These are the different sections of the presentation, so let's start with the introduction. Well, in today's society, communication has undergone a radical transformation. Traditional print-based media have been replaced by digital formats that reach audiences instantly and continuously. The media exists no longer just simply to inform, but also to shape identities, desires, and social values. Among these, bridal magazines within the genre of women magazines represent a fascinating case that because they are not just for entertainment, but ideological tools that project an idealized and commercialized vision of marriage, primarily targeting women. Originated in the United States, these publications have become global cultural exports that present the wedding as the ultimate expression of female identity and success, linking love, beauty, and consumption. Through globalization, this romantic consumerist ideology has spread to other contexts like Spain, where the bridal magazines replicate the American narrative, adapting it to local cultural values, as this study wants to point out. Despite the growing interest in women's magazines within gender studies and sociology, there is still a clear lack of linguistic approaches that analyze how discourse itself functions as a persuasive and ideological mechanisms, and this is why this study stems from. Well, we follow the framework of critical discourse analysis, which conceives language as a social practice embedded in power relations and ideological processes. And we, in these frameworks, examines how linguistic and semiotic choices construct social realities, contributing to either empowerment or control of individuals and groups. In the context of our genre, CDA allows the identification of how language normalizes the capitalist commodification of marriage and reproduces traditional gender roles. Well, we follow Van Dijk's three-dimensional model, and in the first dimension, the textual one, it examines the structures and themes are within the text. In the cognitive dimension, the social cognition that mediates between text and contents is explored. And in the final social dimension, the link between the text and broader social structures and ideologies is also explored. Well, there are some previous studies from the CDA studying how these social realities are constructed and how stereotypical roles are maintained and how this ideological manipulation exists in women magazines. Still, our genre, our bridal discourse genre remains poorly explored. Our general aim is to analyze from a CDA perspective the rhetorical microstructure of the bridal editorial genre in English and Spanish, and to reveal how it functions as a mechanism of ideological manipulation. We also want to identify possible processes of ideological transfer between the US bridal discourse and the Spanish context. Our specific objectives are, in the first dimension, to identify the main themes and sub-themes in both the corpora. In the second dimension, the cognition dimension, to examine the editorial's role as an ideological mediator and expert guiding the bride's consumption choices. And finally, in the social dimension, to observe how discursive representations reproduce traditional power structures and gender roles within the capitalist framework of wedding industry. In order to do that, we selected a corpus of representative bridal magazines of the US, which is Bridal Guide, consisting of 96 pages, printed available in print and online, and which has a strong online presence. And the Spanish bridal magazine is Novias, consisting of 212 pages and also published in both formats and has a smaller social media reach. These are the most leading bridal magazines in their respective countries, and were acquired in a non-editable PDF format, so automated corpus tools were not an option, and data processing and analysis were entirely manual. Well, the research follows a quantitative analysis with a qualitative interpretative approach. And the different phases of the analytical process were, first of all, inductive identification and categorization of the main themes and sub-themes detected in the English and Spanish copies, then quantification and comparison of the recurrence of each propositional content, and finally, analysis and interpretation of the differences observed, considering the textual, cognitive, and social dimensions of Van Dijk's three-dimensional model. Well, now let's see the results. The quantitative results reveal a clear divergence, even though the most important categories are image of the bride and the celebration in the US corpus. Here in the fifth category, we already see a great divergence between the categories, the weight of the categories. And then other important categories are, for example, the sixth, tips and advice, or experiential stories. Well, according to the different dimensions of Van Dijk, the textual dimension has revealed that the predominant category is bride's image, and then core sub-themes are dress, accessories, beauty, body, and wellness routines. So, the textual macrostructure constructs the link between femininity, beauty, and consumption. The wedding becomes a symbolic narrative of achievement and social validation. And in these examples I brought you here, one bride's transformative health and wellness journey, or Escucha tu piel, los productos estrella que te fascinarán. Through language and layout, the magazines naturalize the idea that the wedding and the products associated with it define female success and identity. The repetition of beauty-related contents, the use of imperatives and positive adjectives, and the presence of commercial mentions create a persuasive environment that links femininity and consumption. In the second dimension, we see in certain categories like advice and guidance or experiential stories that the editor assumes a dual discursive role. First of all, as a close friend with an empathic and conversational tone, in articles like Ground Rules by David Tutera, but also as an expert authority with an advising and prescribing behavior, where we see that these two voices legitimize consumption through prestige and intimacy. Finally, in the social dimension, both magazines reproduce the US wedding imaginary, romantic ideal, visual perfection, and emotional exhibition. In Bridal Guide, we see the emphasis is on planning and organization, while Novias reinterprets it emotionally. This thematic contrast reveals how ideologies travel through discourse. The American narrative of love and consumption becomes normalized and recontextualized in a European cultural space. Well, finally, the findings reveal how these magazines function as transnational ideological devices spreading a heteronormative and consumer-driven conception of femininity. The absence or marginalization of the male voice intensifies the symbolic burden placed on women as emotional and aesthetic managers of the wedding, and by extension of the romantic ideal itself. Ultimately, this research confirms that the usefulness of Van Dijk's framework for analyzing the ideological dimensions of media discourse. And although the corpus analysis is limited, it contributes to the linguistic and critical understanding of how discourse naturalizes gender roles and capitalist values through persuasive textual organization. Future research could expand the corpus, include other languages, genres, or digital formats, and check if these ideological patterns persist or evolve in new media ecologies. In conclusion, bridal magazines do not merely describe weddings, they construct and sell an ideology of femininity, love, and consumption that transcends borders, shaping how women imagine themselves and their place in society. Well, here I leave you some references, and I thank you for your attention.